So long time no see. I have had a haircut since I last saw you and approximately 3 mental breakdowns. So I'm doing great. I am hoping you're doing great too. It's been about 7 months since I posted. I just got really busy and also my phone storage has been full. And unfortunately, I'm not a professional. I don't have a camera. I just have a phone and my phone storage was full. I cleared space just to make this video because I'm trying to commit myself to making more long form content in 2023. It's the 1st of January, 2023, by the way. And I really like long form content and I really want to make more of it. So this is me sticking to my New Year's resolution. We should all be giving me a pat on the back. This video is going to be talking about my favorite books of 2022. I read 146 books in 2022, which is fucking amazing. And I'm really, really proud of myself and I'm really happy with that number and really happy with the books I read. This year I really got into literary fiction, which I have been absolutely loving. I've loved the avenues it's opened up to me, the genres or subgenres, the topics, the authors I've found from this. So yeah, there's 12 books here. These are my top 12 books of the year. And yeah, so the first one I'm going to be talking about is Nightbitch by Rachel Yoder, I think it is. This was an experimental literary fiction that actually changed the way I read literary fiction, especially like magical realism. I enjoyed this book more than I can really articulate. Buddy read it with 2 friends. It was so fantastic. The themes of motherhood and womanhood and femininity and also like monstrous femininity and divine monstrosity was so fantastic. I can't recommend this book enough, especially if you like body horror, or anything to do with like the transformation of woman. I just loved this book so much. And I've spoken about it on here before. It's definitely one of my favorite books ever now. And I recommend it often to people who are just getting into lit fic or magical realism. And it's just, mwah, I love this book. Next up is Priory of the Orange Tree. This book took me 3 months to read, which is a long time for me. I like to try and read books usually like either all in a day or like quite fast. But it wasn't because of the book. It was because of me and I had a lot on and I had a really busy couple months. And then when I finished uni, I finished this book and I enjoyed the journey of it so much, but the book itself is so fantastic. And I mean, it's one of those books that you hear a lot of praise for and the praise is completely deserved. It is so beautifully crafted. The writing, the prose is so fantastic and just out of this world, beautiful. I just wanted to gobble it up and swallow it whole after I'd read it. I was so touched by so much of this book. Whilst it is obviously like an epic fantasy, it has such beautiful and deep themes that really resonated with me and I just enjoyed it so much and I can't recommend it enough. And I'm so excited to read the prequel, which I do have an advanced copy of. But it's massive. It's bigger than this one and I don't know if I can do it yet. So I just can't recommend this book enough. It is a biggie and I know some people are put off by the biggies, but it's so worth it. It's a pretty slow paced book, which I know some people don't like, but it gets quite fast towards the end. And as most fantasy books do. And it really made me reconnect with my love for high fantasy because it was one of my favorite genres. And I just really, 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 really enjoyed it. Next up, we have Little Women by Louisa Alcott. I always recommend this as a classic for people who don't like classics, partly because it is technically a children's classic, but we don't hold ourselves to those meaningless labels. This is a beautiful and touching story of sisterhood, femininity, the joys of being a woman and the joys of finding joy in life and what life means and friendship and love and loss, and it's just beautiful and it made me cry and it made me laugh and I enjoyed it so much and I'm going to watch the movie eventually. But yeah, I loved it so much and I can't recommend it enough. It was so fantastic and definitely one of the standout reads for 2022. I couldn't believe I hadn't read it before. Like it was one of those books that I put it down and I was kind of ashamed at myself for not reading it already, just because it was so good and I enjoyed it so thoroughly. So yeah, I would definitely highly recommend it, especially if you're not really a big classics person and you want to be a classics person or you want to get into classics. This is so accessible and so easy to read without losing its complexity and its just excellent craft. So yeah, definitely highly recommend. Next up, we have Babel by Kuang. And yes, I say Babel, not Babel. This book, fucking hell, was the most thorough book I think I've ever read. The most heavily researched, fiction book especially I think I've ever read. I felt like every single page I was absorbing new information, and it didn't make me tired, it didn't make me fatigued, it made me invigorated. It was like learning this whole new language through this magical 1800s system, and it was so fantastic. And obviously the themes, the commentary on colonization and like war and racially motivated actions, oh my god, it was so fantastic. Like, I don't want to, I mean, I'm trying to be measured in my approach to these reviews, but this one is one of those ones I just want to be like, this is so good, because it was genuinely so good. It was so good that when I was in London a couple weeks ago, I bought a signed copy of it from Foyles, because I have my ARC copy, this is that one, and then I have now the signed hardback because I just loved it so much, and it's now a book that I'm going to be collecting because it was so good, and I'm so excited for the second one. And I'm so excited to read Alpha Kuang's other works just based on that, because I've never read any of their other works, and I'm so excited. The next book we've got is Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. This was another book that I have finished it and I was like, I am annoyed at myself for not reading this sooner, because this, man, was this fantastic. This is one of the best classics I've definitely ever read. It has such a unique take on classics as well, considering it's about like a gay man and it's written by a black man, and it was just so fantastic. It was so sad. I read it on a plane, so it was really devastating. I did annotate it a little bit just from what I kind of was drawn to. There were so many beautiful lines in this and so many beautiful passages. Every single page, I was like so enamored and enraptured, and it was a really short, quick read, but it was so beautiful, and I think it's going to stick with me for a long time. And I've already been recommending it to people just in the past like couple weeks, because I only read this about 3 weeks ago, and it's really going to stick with me for life. Next up, I have 2 books by the author Ava Reid. I have The Wolf and the Woodsman and Juniper and Thorn. Both of these books were massive standouts to me this year. They took fantasy and like the magical side of fantasy to a whole new level for me. I just can't recommend these books enough. This one in particular, obviously it's one of my top books of this year because I'm putting it in this video, but I can't talk about how much I loved it enough. It's got like cannibalism and witches and warlocks and freaking ballet lore and like all this random stuff that ties so beautifully together. And it is like the roots of a juniper tree. It is so deep and beautiful, and it ground right into me and like burrowed into my heart. And I read this in I think March or something, and I haven't stopped thinking about it since. It's so fantastic. And obviously the same with The Wolf and the Woodsman. This is much more of a traditional fantasy romance, but the folklore in this genuinely is so different and so unique. When I was reading it, I was like, I can't believe no one has spoken about this before or written about this before, because it's so interesting and it stood out so much to me, and I just enjoyed it so much. And Ivike and Gaspar, I think his name was, were just so good, and I really, really enjoyed them. I mean, obviously because of the romance, but I loved both of these books, and I'm so excited to see what Ava Reid does next. Their prose and their writing is so fantastic. I know they have a YA coming out next year, so I'm really excited to see how that goes. Both of these are adult fantasy. So yeah, I'm so excited to see where they take their writing, because it was so fantastic. Next up, we have the only non-fiction on this list, which is Beautiful Boy by David Sheff. This book literally broke me down. It punched me, it kicked me, it made me cry, it made me bleed in my soul, and it was so amazing and so fantastic and so impactful to me. I enjoyed it so thoroughly. The writing was so fantastic. I did tab and annotate this one as well because it just really stuck out to me. So many lines of this book have stuck with me since finishing it. I almost didn't, just because of the subject matter. And for me personally, I didn't know if I could handle that. And I just, no one should hold back from reading this, because it was so fantastic and so sad. And I think everyone needs a little bit of sadness every so often. A lot of these are a bit sad. I think some of the next ones are going to be happier. So next up we have A Certain Hunger, because I love women and I love cannibalism. A Certain Hunger was such a wild ride for me. I fucking loved it. I think I did annotate this one as well. I also buddy read this with 2 of my friends, and we all loved it so much. And it was so good. Like, every single line was so hilarious. I'm just going to read you one of the lines I just found. Now all I had to do was wait for Gil's anaphylactic shock to kick in before I pushed him overboard and cut out his tongue. Like, don't you want to know more? Don't you want to read more? This book I absorbed it so thoroughly. I absorbed it so quickly. I literally wanted to like put it inside a little space in my brain and have it playing on a loop. I think it would be such a good audiobook experience as well. So I might reread it in 2023 via audiobook. I feel like I've been repeating myself a lot in this video saying I really enjoyed these books and I really loved them and you should read them. But I genuinely do recommend every single one of these books I'm discussing because they were so good. And this one especially, I know it's like a TikTok book and like people talk about it a lot, but you should really take a chance on it. Even if you're a bit freaked out by gore and cannibalism, I would definitely take a chance on it because it was so good. And the messaging on like womanhood and monstrous femininity, like just like Nightbitch, so fantastic. Loved it so much. Next we have The Giant Dark, which is a book I've never really heard anyone speak about before, and that is such a shame to me because it is so good. This book is all about fan culture and parasocial relationships, which I think is really prevalent and relevant to our current kind of social context. I think if you have ever been a stan or a fan, which clearly is me, you should read this book because it gives a really interesting perspective on the point of view of the fans. Basically, it flips back and forth between the point of view of the fans and the point of view of our main characters. And it's like this love story between Ada, who is this like pop star who is kind of very like ethereal and mysterious, which is why her fans are really kind of overstepping a boundary, which you kind of get through their point of view, and her ex-lover, which I believe his name is pronounced Isan, and their kind of wild journey through love and navigating the relationship between her and her fans. And it was really, really fantastic. The prose in this was so beautiful. The writing, it was honestly unlike anything I've ever read before. I'm so glad I took a chance on it. I honestly bought it for the cover, like genuinely I bought it for the cover. And it was so worth it. It was so good. And I just haven't heard that many people talk about it. And I want people to talk about it because, man, it was good. I enjoyed it so much. And yeah, it was so fantastic. And I think you should read it. Next up, we have Cemetery Boys. Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. I mean, I feel like this is one of those things that everyone already knows how good it is, but it was genuinely so fantastic. The trans rep in this obviously is a very big part of why people read it, but I think something that's not mentioned as much is the Latinx folklore and like magical system that is part of this story, and the raising of the dead and the kind of spooky elements. It's a ghost story at its heart, and I think it's so beautiful. And obviously there's like a bit of a romance subplot, which people do talk about a lot, but I think the story itself, the writing is so beautiful, so fantastic. I read this, like I consumed it really fast, and then I recommended it to every single one of my coworkers at the bookstore because I was like, you need to read this book because we all work in the YA section. And oh my God, it was so fantastic. And yeah, I mean, I can't recommend it enough. I'm repeating myself so much in this video, but genuinely I can't recommend it enough. It was so good, especially if you like kind of funny, spooky, or like cozy spooky, I think is a good way to put it. And it was like a cliffhanger and like a bit of gore, but then it was also such heartwarming events, and I just fucking loved it so much, and I really think you should read it. Next we have Stardust by Neil Gaiman. This book, man, when I was a child, I used to love, when I was a child, I loved the movie Stardust, and obviously as an adult, I also love the movie Stardust, but the book, something about it is just unmatched to me. It's definitely my favorite Neil Gaiman, and I've read most of his works. I'm currently reading the Sandman graphic novels, which I do really love, and I love the kind of adult nature of them, the gore and the violence, but this is so whimsical and so beautiful, and I've never read anything like it. It's such a short little so detailed and so intricate fantasy. Obviously Tristan is an amazing character, but every single character in this book is fantastic. So intricate and so unique and so deep as the depth of the characters for such a short book is so amazing, and I just enjoyed it so much, and I really did love it, and I really, really do recommend it to pretty much everyone I talk to about it. And I think it's actually a bit different as Neil Gaiman's works go, because apart from his children's ones, like the Graveyard Book is a bit, I would probably say, the most similar to this one, just in terms of writing and story structure. I just think it's so good, and I really do, really, really, really do think you should read it because it's so good, and I loved it so much. And I've seriously been recommending it to so many people, which again, repeating myself, but whatever. And last but not least, we have Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I love Emily Henry. I will literally read her grocery list. I love everything about her. I just got this signed copy from my friend Alia, who works at another bookstore. So that's really exciting for me. This book at its core is about sisterhood and the bond between sisters, and how so many things will be thrown at you in life, but basically like your sister's always there for you, sister's always got your back. And I just think the love between sisters is so deep and so unmatched, and so not really discussed as far as I know in fiction, especially romance fiction, because this is a romance novel, but at its core it is really about Nora and her sister Libby. Obviously Nora and Charlie's love story is beautiful and amazing, and Emily Henry can never write a bad love story. But the thing that really stands out to me, especially with this book, and what I usually talk about when I recommend it, is the bond between Nora and her sister. And I just think it's so beautifully done. And I think the way that they interact with each other is so beautiful. And I just loved every part of this story. Nora is such a great character, especially because she's like a powerful woman. She's a shark, like what they call her is a shark. Kind of businesswoman-y, and very different from Emily Henry's other leading ladies. So I really appreciated that. It was a bit of difference from her, and she just manages to keep things fresh every single time she writes a book. And I'm so excited to read Happy Place, which is her one that I actually have a copy of it, and I'm going to start reading it really soon. But yeah, anyway, I love Emily Henry. I loved this book so much, and I'm excited to see what she does next. So yeah, those were my favorite books from 2022. As I said, I read so many good books this year, but those ones really just stood out to me. And I hope that if you take away anything from this video, it's that I don't know anything else to say apart from that I really enjoyed it and I really recommend it. Ultimately, what you're gonna read and what you're gonna like isn't gonna be the same as me to an exact T, but I do really appreciate when people say, oh, I read this book because of you, and I'd love to hear if you've read any of these books or you saw them on any of my other social media and read them because of that. And I'd really love to know what your favorite book of 2022 was, because I have seen so many interesting ones, and I want to build up my 2023 TBR, because I'm going to try and read 150 books this year. Oh my God, that's crazy. So I better get started. So I've got to go, but it was lovely talking to you, and I hope to see you again soon.